everybody! Welcome back to Living Traditions Homestead. Well, today is a really fun day because today I'm going to plant the permanent herb gardens that I have been waiting for about 8 years. Just about a week and a half ago, Kevin and I brought you a video where we built these wonderful raised beds here in our garden area. We have 3 of them that are all corner beds like this. And we decided that this extra space we would dedicate to my herb gardens.
Sarah has been looking for the perfect place to plant herbs, especially perennial herbs, ever since we moved to Missouri. She had a beautiful herb garden in Arizona that she loved. We actually brought some of those herbs with us and have had them just in tubs and planters and other things around ever since we moved here. And we've never had a really good place for them. But now with these Vajayga raised beds, it's going to be perfect for her.
So today I'm going to be taking some of the herbs that have been basically just surviving in the pots that I've had for like 5 years or so, planting them in these raised beds, but also there are some smaller pots that I started seed earlier in the spring, either to plant somewhere here on the homestead or to sell, give to friends. I did hold some of those back in hopes that I could plant some of them this year. So I do have some of those that are also going to find permanent places to live today. As you know, I do lots of cooking on the homestead, so quite a few of these herbs are going to be culinary herbs or for cooking, but also several of them are for medicinal purposes because I love to grow herbs that can help us, keep us healthy, help us when we're sick. So as I plant, I'll just kind of talk a little bit about them, but I am no herbalist, you guys. I definitely wouldn't consider myself that. I'm definitely a novice, but I am excited to have an opportunity to get more of those into the house to help us with our health.
Now on the last video, we showed you guys that we filled these beds with a mixture of potting soil, composted manure, and mushroom compost. We have, since that time, we've been watering these every day so that they would get, really nice and hydrated. And then yesterday we actually got about 2.5, almost 3 inches of rain. So these beds have really been watered in well now. You can see that they haven't really sunk a whole lot, which is good because what we wanted was we wanted to give these time to kind of sink so we could top them back off. We haven't really had to do that. No. We did add a little bit, I think, on a couple of them, but for the most part, these are ready to go. I think this is going to be great growing medium for all of these herbs.
So let's get started. I can hardly wait. So we're going to start off planting this bed right here. Now the size of this bed is 7.5 feet long by 2.5 feet deep on both sides here. So this is a really nice size bed, and actually they're 17 inches tall, which will give plenty of room for their roots to grow and expand. Now this bed right here is going to be planted with a combination of things that I have already had in big buckets for a long time and just a couple things in smaller pots. I created a really nerdy kind of garden plan here on a piece of paper, so that's what I'm referring to because I can't remember what I had planned everywhere. So I'm going to be planting anise hyssop in this bed, creeping thyme, yarrow, lemongrass, and then chives. Now initially it'll seem like I'm not putting a lot in these beds. A lot of these perennials over time are going to get pretty big, but I also don't have everything here on the homestead that I eventually want to plant in these beds. So I do want to leave some space for me to add things, not necessarily this year because it's kind of late in the season, but next year and the years after that. So the anise hyssop, the creeping thyme, yarrow, and the chives all need to be dug out of big buckets. So that's what we're going to work on first. Kevin dug out a nice bunch of the chives for me. Now the chives are really primarily for cooking. We love to just be able to dice them up and sprinkle them on top of things in salads and all kinds of stuff. So I'm going to dig that in. Next up, I'm going to plant some anise hyssop. Now, anise hyssop kind of tastes like licorice, and it's actually one of Kevin's favorite things to make tea out of, both sun tea and hot tea for in the winter. Also, it is good for kind of helping with colds. So it's a perfect thing to have a warm cup of tea in the winter when you're kind of feeling under the weather. Now, anise hyssop also has beautiful long purple flowers, and it gets quite tall. So I want to make sure that I plant it kind of back here in the back of the bed so that as it gets tall, it won't like overshadow anything. And the tall purple flowers are just going to be beautiful. Now, it'll get pretty big, so I'm not worried about these little plants. They're going to grow tall, several feet high, and they're going to do really great here. Okay, let's move on. In front of the anise hyssop right here, I'm going to put in some creeping thyme. I love to cook with thyme, but I also love the way creeping thyme looks as it's growing because it kind of falls over the edges of containers or buckets, and if it were planted in the ground, it would kind of spread out, kind of like a ground cover. I'm just going to put one small plant here because it really does spread and grow quickly. And like I said, I don't want this herb bed to get overgrown too quickly. Now, even though thyme is primarily used for cooking, you can also use this and brew it into a tea, and it is also good for colds. Here at the end, I'm going to be putting some yarrow. Now this is common yarrow, so the flowers are white. It will get quite tall as well, and I think the flowers are absolutely beautiful. Now yarrow is kind of a multi-purpose type of medicinal herb. The leaves can be dried and powdered and used to stop bleeding, like almost kind of like a styptic powder where you can pack it into a wound and it will stop the bleeding. Yarrow is also good for the skin. It's kind of like an anti-inflammatory for skin, but it's also good for digestion. A lot of the medicinal herbs that I'm talking about today have just so many things that it can be helpful for. I don't know them all, so if you're interested in learning more, I suggest actually that you look into learning from Amy Fuel. She is the founder of the Homesteaders of America conference, but she also teaches herbalism and has a couple of books and really is a fantastic resource. So if you are interested in learning more about herbalism, I suggest you check her out. Another nice thing about yarrow, which we're going to be implementing in the greenhouse, is the pollen on the flowers is a really good food source for ladybugs, but also because they have so many leaves and they kind of fall close to the ground, it's a really great habitat for ladybugs as well. They'll go in there and kind of hibernate over the winter. And so we're hoping to plant buckets of yarrow in there yet this summer so that hopefully the ladybugs will kind of nest and hibernate in there over the winter. Okay, just one more thing to plant in this herb garden before we move on to the others. Now the last herb I am planting in this garden is an annual. Well, it'll be an annual for us because we have a hard winter. It is lemongrass. Now we love the flavor of lemongrass. I've never planted it before. Stark Brothers had it and they sent me one to give it a try, and I'm going to try it. It's a little late in the season, but we'll see what it will do here for us. Now before I plant it, I'm actually going to give it a pretty significant haircut. It should come back just fine. It smells amazing already. And I'm going to just plant it kind of in the middle here. Like I said, the lemongrass will only be with us this year. If I like it a lot, then I might plant some again next year. It's pretty root bound. It wanted to be planted in the spring. Okay, one garden done, 2 more to go. There are 4 different herbs that are going to be going into this raised bed. Back in the corner, I'm going to be planting marshmallow plants. Up here at the front, I'm going to plant lavender, and actually quite a bit of it. Lavender is really one of my favorite plants of all time, always has been since I was a little girl. Lavender is only about 50-50 whether or not it survives the winter here. Generally, I have half of them die. So I'm going to plant quite a bit in hopes that at least half of them will survive the winter. Here I'm going to be planting holy basil, and then at the end I'm going to be planting another type of thyme that's kind of like a bush thyme. Most of these that I'm going to be planting are in the little pots that I've been keeping going in the greenhouse, but the lavender, I need to dig out some pretty big plants, but I also have little ones to put in there. So we're going to get started on that. I want to dig out that lavender first and then plant everything else. Now these plants ended up being a lot bigger than I thought that they were, and that's really great. I'm excited that they're doing really well. Now lavender not only smells amazing, and it's not only a beautiful flower, but overall as an herb, it's very calming to the system. A lot of people will use it for, in their aromatherapy, just kind of to calm down their nerves. You can put it on the skin. It's very calming on the skin. You can make a tea out of it. It's calming for the whole system. I just really love lavender for all of those reasons, and I think it's also beautiful. So I'm going to dig in these big plants here, and then I have some more little plants that I'm going to plant in front of it, because I would just like this entire end of the bed to be filled with lavender plants. I'm going to dig in this next one, kind of next door to it. I want to give them enough space that they can get bigger if they'd like to, but I also want to leave enough space right in here for some new smaller plants. Now here are some of the little lavender plants that have been waiting ever so patiently in the greenhouse to be planted. I planted these from seed, I think in January. So they have been waiting patiently to be planted, and today is their day. I'm kind of stimulating their roots a little bit because they are quite root bound. And by doing that, they hopefully will stop growing in the same direction like around a pot, and they'll start spreading their roots out a little bit. So next up, I'm going to be planting marshmallow plants in the corner and kind of in the back. They also get quite tall and they have some really pretty flowers on them. Marshmallow is actually harvested for the roots. The roots have kind of like a milky white substance on the inside that is very soothing to the body. So marshmallow root tea or something like that is very soothing for a sore throat. But it's also soothing to like the entire digestive tract. So if you're having indigestion or if you're having intestinal trouble, you can incorporate marshmallow root into, what you're drinking, and just kind of overall gives a kind of nice soothing feeling to anything that's kind of irritated in the body. I also have had kind of spotty success with marshmallow in the past. So I'm going to plant quite a few of them. I think I have 6 of them. I'm not sure if I'm going to plant all 6 of them, but I'm going to plant them in, kind of this back center area right here. Hopefully they will grow up really big and I can harvest the roots like next year or the year after. You really want the roots to be nice and fat when you pull them up to harvest them, really nice and milky and white. And that is going to take a couple years for them to mature to that point. So I'm just going to lay these out and plant them, and then we can move on. I've decided to plant 4 of them. Now they have been in the greenhouse for a long time. I did plant these guys from seed as well, and they are kind of stressed out from being in these tiny little pots for so long. So I'm hoping for the best with them, and I'm hoping now that they're going to be in some really nice soil that they'll do well. They actually aren't as root bound as I thought that they would be. I'm moving on to the holy basil. It's also called Tulsi. This will be an annual here for us because it is very frost tender. Holy basil or Tulsi is really great for the immune system. I am hoping that it will get very big and I'll have multiple cuttings yet this year so I can dry it or freeze dry it and keep it around for immune system building over the winter. So I have 3 plants here. I'm going to kind of plant them just in the middle here, so I have enough room to put my last herb right over there. The last herb that we're going to plant in this raised bed is just common thyme. So common thyme grows more like a bush. It is a perennial. I love to have it in my cooking, just like the creeping thyme. There really is no real flavor difference. It just has a different growth habit, and I'm excited to be adding just this common bush type thyme. Okay, that's it for this bed. We've got 1 more herb bed to go. This last raised bed, it's a little bit smaller than the other 2 that I just planted. They're 5.5 feet long on each side, 2.5 feet wide, and also 17 inches tall. Now I'm going to be planting 3 different perennials in this bed today. In the back here, I'm going to be planting Echinacea purpurea, which is one of my favorite flowers of all time. It'll get tall, the purple cone flowers, love them. I'm also going to be planting sage, just kind of your common sage to use in the kitchen. And then also I'm going to be planting catnip right here. All 3 of these need to be dug out of buckets, so we need to get strong and get over there and dig them out. echinacea is primarily used for immune system boosting, and I think a lot of people, know about that. There are a lot of supplements and teas and stuff on the market that include echinacea. Now, echinacea is normally, the roots are dug up to use medicinally, even though the leaves and the flowers and stuff also have medicinal properties. I guess I would assume that more of the kind of medicinal chemicals or properties are in the roots. I have a nice big plant here that I'm transplanting from one of my buckets. And one of the main reasons why I decided to plant echinacea in this particular bed is because I will see it as I'm walking up to the gardens, as I'm walking around and checking on animals and stuff. When it's flowering, it'll just be all big and beautiful. And so that's why I picked this spot, because it's going to be the most visible for me right here. You can see I got a nice big plant there. Let's put that down in there. And then I brought 2 more plants from that same bucket that are just a little bit smaller. My echinacea from last year went to flower, and then I didn't pick all of them, so it went to seed. And now I've got like little baby echinaceas all over my buckets back there. I'm going to give a bunch of them to my friends. But I also started more echinacea seed in the greenhouse in the winter, so I have a lot of echinacea still that I'll be giving away. Now, we don't have cats. We're not cat lovers, but I do like to grow catnip because it is very calming for the body. And a lot of people find relief from headaches and migraine headaches using catnip. So I like to keep it around. We do have some people in the family that have cats, and so from time to time, I do like to give them catnip too for their cats, and they seem to enjoy it as well. Now, catnip does have a pretty flower. It's actually very similar to the flowers of the anise hyssop, and so it will add some beauty to this herb bed as well. Okay, let's move on to the sage. Sage is primarily used for kitchen, for culinary uses. I don't use a whole lot of sage. It's a very strong scent and a strong flavor, but from time to time I will use it in our cooking. Sage is actually really good for the digestion, and a lot of people will incorporate it into a tea during kind of cold and cough season and find some relief using sage for that purpose as well. Now, the sage is looking pretty sad. After I plant it, I'm probably going to go back and cut it back quite a bit so that it can have some really nice, new, invigorated growth. Now, I'm giving this sage quite a substantial haircut. It really needs it. And even though I'm cutting like all the leaves off, this is really going to stimulate it to put leaves on these short little stems here, and some of them are actually going to branch off, and this will become really nice and bushy. So you don't have to worry about that. So these are all of the herbs that I'm going to plant in these raised beds this year. Now, I don't want you to think that I'm missing all of these super critical, important herbs. I actually have herbs already planted in several places. I've got basil in the greenhouse, which you saw us plant, and I actually did quite a bit of companion planting in these raised beds in the rest of the garden. I actually have more Genovese kind of sweet basil here with the okra. I've got a whole bed of dill here. rosemary by the beans, cinnamon, basil. So I've got quite a few other things already planted. Now in the future, I want to plant a lot more. I want to plant oregano. Actually, over the winter, the chickens got into some of my buckets and they tore up all of my oregano. So I want some oregano. I want feverfew. There's some others that I want as well. Oh, I have calendula, which is great for the skin. I have that in with the onions, but I do want to continue developing these beds over time. Now, I do want to add that there are a few plants that are not appropriate to plant in a container garden like I'm planting here. I really want to be able to plant these beds with multiple types of herbs, but there are herbs that are going to completely dominate these entire things over the years, and I don't want that to happen. For instance, mint. Any kind of mint is just going to spread and choke out and take over this entire bed. I love mint. Actually, spearmint is my favorite, and I do have a bucket of it. But in my experience, it is not a good idea to plant mint in a container like this with other plants. It's just going to choke it out. There are also two other plants that I would not plant in this situation. One is horseradish, which we have. It gets so big and it will take over also, that this is not a good situation for horseradish. And also comfrey. Comfrey also takes over. It also shoots roots down deep into the ground. It actually will prefer to be in the ground rather than in a container. So comfrey is another one that I wouldn't plant in here. But I want to ask you guys, what am I missing? What should I plan on for next year to add to these herb gardens, both for cooking and for medicine? I want to hear in the comments below. You guys, I hope that you enjoyed spending time with me today planting the herb gardens that I have waited for about 8 years. I'm so excited to have a permanent place for them. If you're enjoying videos like this, make sure that you hit the subscribe button below. And also remember, the best way you can help us here on the homestead is just to share our videos. Until next time, thank you so much for stopping by our homestead. Take care and God bless.